Homeostasis is maintaining the presence of a stable internal environment. When homeostasis is off balance and it is not maintained, that is a condition of illness which will lead to death. So it's pretty important to understand how homeostasis is preserved in the body. So it was first described in the mid-19th century, but in 1775 there was a very interesting demonstration by an English physician, Charles Blagden. So he had a special room prepared that he lighted up until everything inside was warm. Then, together with several of his associates, a dog and a beefsteak, they walked in. The researchers sweated, the dog panted as the temperature inside the room, or oven if you like to call it, gradually rose until it reached as high as 127 degrees Celsius, which is almost 261 degrees Fahrenheit. 45 minutes later, the beefsteak, which is lifeless and therefore cannot maintain homeostasis, was completely cooked, but the dog and all the human participants walked out of the room and survived. So what happened there? The living organisms can maintain homeostasis. A piece of meat cannot. So here are the three components of homeostatic regulation. The first is the receptor or sensor that is sensitive to environmental changes, and we're going to compare homeostasis to our thermostat and controlling the temperature of our houses. The control center is the integration center. It processes information from the receptor and sends out commands. So if we were thinking of temperature, we have temperature receptors in our skin that are sensitive to hot and cold. They would receive that information and send it to the brain for processing. The brain will then send out commands to the effector, and the effector is what is going to respond and change something, do something. Now, in our bodies, effectors are either muscles or glands. So with homeostasis, you start with a set point. So maybe you like your room at 22 degrees, and that's the temperature that you're set at. This is Celsius. So when the temperature goes below 22 or below the set point, the air conditioner will turn on, raising the temperature. When it reaches a certain level, the air conditioner will turn off, and so on. So this is going to maintain your house within a few degrees of the set point at all times. So here we have the receptor, which is the thermometer or sensor. The information comes in that there's been some change. There's been a stimulus, which may be a feeling of heat or a feeling of cold. The thermostat is going to send commands. It's going to take in this information and send commands to the air conditioner to turn it on and cool the room down. This is maintaining homeostasis, and it's actually given a specific name. It's called negative feedback. Negative feedback is when the stimulus kicks in, and let's say in terms of temperature, the temperature goes up in your room. It's getting hot. Negative feedback will bring it back down. It opposes that original stimulus. So the stimulus is hot temperature, and the negative feedback means that the effector is going to bring the temperature back down. So it's always bringing, if conditions take homeostasis away from the set point, negative feedback is going to minimize those changes by trying to bring back to the set point. So most homeostasis is controlled by negative feedback. There is some set point and very little variation from that set point. So here we go. You start, homeostasis is disturbed, you go outside on a hot day, your temperature receptors in your skin or brain are stimulated, the control center of your brain receives information about that stimulation and sends commands to the smooth muscles in the walls of your blood vessels and sweat glands. So your blood vessels in your skin open up and more hot blood flows to the skin, allowing more evaporation as that heat reaches your skin. And sweat glands will respond by producing sweat to cool you down. Homeostasis is restored. Positive feedback is more rare in the body. What it does is, instead of coming back to the set point, there's some stimulus, and there's a change that exaggerates the stimulus. So you're always going in one direction. You get extreme responses. It's not for restoring homeostasis. It's for some goal. So that goal might be blood clotting, where all these factors have to interact in order for you to blood clot. So here we see a break in a blood vessel wall causing bleeding. Damage to the cells in the blood vessel wall release chemicals that begin the process of blood clotting. The chemicals start chain reactions in which cells, cell fragments, and soluble proteins in the blood begin to form a clot. Some things involved there you might be familiar with platelets. That's what they mean by cell fragments. As clotting continues, each step releases chemicals that further accelerate the process. It becomes exaggerated. This escalating process is a positive feedback loop that ends with the formation of a blood clot, which patches the vessel wall and stops the bleeding. Here's another example of positive feedback. Childbirth. What part of a homeostatic mechanism senses an environmental stimulus? Whoops, no answer there. The answer is receptor. What type of feedback provides a response that is opposite to the original stimulus? Again, no answer there. The correct answer is negative feedback. What type of the following is an example of positive feedback? Only forming a blood clot when bleeding is positive feedback. Anatomical terms are very important in anatomy and physiology. It helps you locate where you are in the body. Some of these words are based on Latin or Greek. It's a whole new vocabulary for you, and that's what Chapter 1's about. There's a lot of vocabulary in Chapter 1. There's nothing conceptually difficult, but it's a whole lot of new terminology that you need to know. Some eponyms persist, and these are named after the discoverer, such as the Achilles tendon. Now we call it the calcaneal tendon. The eustachian tube is now called the auditory tube, and so on. So I hope you remember anatomical position, standing erect, hands at the side, palms facing forward. So you'll notice there's quite a few terms here related to the body, such as oral, mental, axillary, brachial, antecubital, antebrachial. You need to know these terms. There's an activity in Moodle. You print off the sheet, cut out the page, the little slips of paper, and you can tape them on someone. So you need to go through these terms. I will go through them right now. Some of them relate to things you already know about, like nasal. You know that's related to the nose. Frontal is forehead. Frontal's very nice, because once you learn that that's related to the forehead, you know the name of that bone. That bone is the frontal bone. You know the name of the lobe of the brain behind that bone. That's the frontal lobe. Cranial refers to skull and facial to face. Cephalic means head. Oral relates to mouth. You know that one. Mental's a new one. It's a little tough. Chin. Mental is chin. Axillary is your armpit. That is very common. We'll see that a lot. Brachial also, we'll see that is your upper arm, your arm. Antecubital is the inside of your elbow here. And, well, I guess we'll wait till we get to the backside. Antebrachial is your forearm. So ante is before. So here's your antebrachial, and up here is your brachial. Carpal, when you have carpal tunnel, it's a wrist problem. So your carpal bones are your wrist bones. Carpal is your wrist area. Palm is palmar. Pollex is thumb. You can think you've got two P's in your hand, palmar and pollex. Your fingers are digits or phalanges. Patella is your kneecap. The front of your leg is crural. Your ankle bones are tarsal. Digits or phalanges, toes, same as fingers. And your big toe is your hallux. We'll start back up at the top. Nasal, nose. Ocular is eye. Ocular or orbital is eye. Otic is ear. Buccal, cheek. Cervical, think of a cervical collar. If you've hurt yourself, it's neck. Thoracic is your chest area. Mammary refers to the breast. Abdominal, umbilical, pelvic is all part of the trunk. Manual is hand. Inguinal is the groin, that crease between your leg and your trunk. Pubic is the pubic area. Femoral is the thigh, and pedal is the foot. Backside, cephalic head, cervical neck. The shoulder is acromial. Do you remember the armpit? That was axillary. Think of the dorsal fin of the shark. It's on the back of the shark. Olecranal is the elbow. Lumbar is the lower back. Gluteal refers to buttocks. Popliteal to the front of the knee. Popliteal to the back of the knee. I was thinking of patella is in the front. Sural is the calf. Calcaneal is the heel or foot. Plantar is the bottom of the foot. There are 4 abdominal quadrants. Quadrant tells you there are 4 of them, and you identify it by the patient or victim's side. So you have upper right quadrant and the patient's upper right side. So this is all, think of this transection through the umbilicus or navel, your belly button. So you've got your right upper quadrant, your left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, and left lower quadrant. There are 9 abdominal pelvic regions. All of these terms you must know. Here we have a right and a left hypochondriac. Chondriac refers to cartilage. We have a right and left lumbar region and a right and left inguinal region. In the center, umbilical is around where your umbilical cord was attached there. And epi means on top of, gastric is referring to stomach. Epigastric is the upper region, and hypogastric is the lower pubic region. So at this point you can't identify what organs are in what region or what quadrant, but this shows you. The red lines represent the regions. There are 9 regions. The blue lines represent the quadrants. So you can see, there it is. There's our appendix right here, coming off the large intestine. So you would say it is in the right lower quadrant, or you would say it is in the hypogastric region. Which abdominal pelvic quadrant typically contains the appendix? Hope you remember that one. Right lower quadrant. What root word means under? Correct answer is hypo. Which of these refers to nerve tissue? And that would be D, neuro.